Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin. Eclectic Glam reviews and general musical meanderings. Like a lot of other music fans, I'm still kind of reeling from the loss of Eddie Van Halen. And as I promised about a month and a half ago, I am doing a long-term study of all of the Van Halen albums, the David Lee Roth fronted albums. Only really because I've had these albums for a while, and some of them are albums that I listened to and promised myself I'd come back to, because my relationship with Van Halen is kind of weird and backward. I've always loved all their music, but I started late in their career. I've kind of gone back and just filled in the blanks ever since high school, an album here, an album there. So I don't quite know exactly when I ended up with Van Halen II. I either got it from a bargain bin somewhere along the line, or maybe from the Columbia Book and Record Club back in the day when you could, do the penny sign up for things. But I got it and I listened to it, and I remember having my very early first impression of Van Halen II was that it was almost like listening to Van Halen I all over again, and that's a compliment. Van Halen I, as we saw last time, was a pretty groundbreaking album. It changed a lot of things about rock music. It was this very unique blend of pop music and hard rock and just kind of arena level sounds. But also very intimate. There's a very intimate feeling to that first Van Halen record. You feel like that you're kind of in the room with them, right? And that album was very successful. They got quite a bit of mileage out of it. They got opening slots for very visible bands and had some songs get on the radio. They increased their visibility some. So Van Halen II was recorded, again, as often is the case, under some pressure. Rumor has it the whole thing went down within a week. Recording and everything. And it's surprising because although it does a really good job of capturing a lot of the sounds that were available on Van Halen I, it also kind of has a little more polish, despite the fact that it was recorded in less amount of time. And there's probably a couple of reasons for that. The band had been playing live out on the road for a while and had gotten tighter as a unit than they probably ever had before, and also probably a little bit more comfort in the studio. But despite having a little bit maybe more of a polished feel, and maybe a little bit less of a rambunctious sense to it. The album, Van Halen's first album, you really felt like the guys were turned loose in the studio and just kind of went insane with the help of their producer, Ted Templeman. And when they came back to Van Halen II, by and large, they recaptured that feeling. And I would consider that a success for a sophomore album. When you have a really big first album, you have kind of two paths you can roll on. You can kind of give your audience more of the same, or you could take a branch off and try to do something different. And Van Halen definitely did more of the same. Almost, I think you could argue, to a fault. And it would be a fault if Van Halen II overall wasn't so successful. Van Halen II also hinted at the possibilities of Van Halen's broader appeal. Their first album was very kind of sneery and confrontational and kind of, in some ways, almost adolescent. And Van Halen II kind of came out with some songs that I think predicted the kind of success that they would have later, although they didn't quite get the visibility out of it at the time. I think nothing shows that better than the track Dance the Night Away. Dance the Night Away is like a party anthem that crosses over boundaries and crosses over genres. If you are a hard rock fan, you'll appreciate its energy and you appreciate the intensity of the group. And if you're ever more of a sing-along pop fan, there's a lot to sink your teeth into. There's a whole kind of component of having a group sing along with it. This is part of Van Halen's structure, where they had the backup vocals play such a big role. And those backup vocals invite the audience to sing along. And quite clearly, I think Dance the Night Away was pegged early on as a possible hit by the band, by Ted Templeman. So the question is, to me personally, is why isn't that song the first track on the album, the lead track on the album? It's clearly like a radio-friendly hit, and it's one that's extremely memorable. So why would they put it second, their track listing on there? Well, I think that's kind of a rabbit hole question. But it's also a question that indicates the sort of mindset and kind of smarts that Ted Templeman had when he was putting together Van Halen II with the group. Because as I said, and as other critics have said, Van Halen II almost gives this impression, it's like this mirror image, this sort of rhyming stanza to Van Halen I. It's kind of a very similar experience. And so one of the ways in which that feeling, that sense, is created on the album is by the track listing. The opening track was a cover of You're No Good, which was originally made kind of most popular by Linda Ronstadt earlier in the 70s. I'm over you. Ted Templeman was the kind of guy, I think, that would look at these cover songs and think, well, this is a group that can actually take a song that's already really good and is familiar to people and reinterpret it in a way that they and I can resell. So in a way, opening up with that song, You're No Good, is kind of a softball throw to hook fans in. But also, it's a way to start off the experience of Van Halen 2 sort of like you start off the experience of Van Halen 1. Van Halen 1 starts off with the song Running with the Devil, which is kind of a dark tune. And it's also kind of a slower tempoed rock song. Actually, if you put a metronome to it, it ends up being about 95 beats per minute. But if you put a metronome similarly on You're No Good, it's also 95 beats per minute. It's the exact same tempo. Not exactly the same key, but definitely has that same kind of dark, ominous, brooding feel to it. And the way that they sing the song is almost, again, kind of adolescent and jeery. They sing the lyrics with kind of a sneer. So it kind of echoes the opening track of Van Halen 1. It's like Running with the Devil, except this time they have a cover song, which previously on Van Halen 1 had gotten them a lot of visibility. Then if you look at the second track on Van Halen 1, that's Eruption. Now that doesn't exactly fit this, but bear with me. We're going to come back and catch that in a second as we kind of map this whole thing out. But You Really Got Me was the third track from Van Halen 1. It's a tempo change from the beginning, the kind of dark, ominous opening Running with the Devil track, to You Really Got Me, which is kind of a fun, catchy party track. And similarly, on Van Halen 2, you've got Dance the Night Away as the second track. Now, that's an original tune, but it's an upbeat song. It's about 20 clicks faster than the opening track, not unlike that relationship between Running with the Devil and You Really Got Me. So the opening track the opening of the album has this kind of slow, ominous beginning, and then a party song as the second song. And then this kind of continues to map out, spool out over the next two or three songs. Somebody Give Me a Doctor, Bottoms Up, and Out of Love Again. I could go through and give you several different ways in which those three songs correlate to the next couple of songs on Van Halen 1. There's a lot of elements that are the same between them, tempos and licks and things like that, but not the least of which is on the track 4, Bottoms Up, there's this vocal breakdown that kind of happens. And on Van Halen 1 and I'm the One, track 5 has another kind of little vocal breakdown in it.
Ba-ba-da, shoo-be-doo-wah, ba-bum, ba-ba-da, shoo-be-doo-wah, ba-bum, ba-ba-da, shoo-be-doo-be-doo-be-doo-wah, ba-ba-da, shoo-be-doo-wah, ba-bum, ba-ba-da, shoo-be-doo-be-doo-be-doo-wah, ba-ba-da, shoo-be-doo-wah, ba-bum, ba-ba-da, shoo-be-doo-wah.
This one's a little bit more, a little more structured, a little more set up in their three-part, the Three Stooges doo-wop sound. But it's still there. It still has the same kind of structure there. And you could sit there and look at that for a while and map all this stuff out. But whenever you get out to track number 6 or so, this is where the experiences of the album start to diverge pretty drastically. Because, Light Up the Sky and Jamie's Crying don't quite have the same feel. And throughout the rest of the album, it doesn't really match up the exact same way. But you have to think about the fact that back in this day, albums were two-sided. Okay, and track 6 is where the album was always turned over. And this was a consideration whenever people put together track listings for albums back in the day. Whenever you had to turn a tape cassette over or turn a record over, you had to make the second side experience as interesting as the first side, or else you just, people just play the first side over and over again. And so for Van Halen II on the second side, they kind of take it a little bit different path than what happens on Van Halen I. But the really interesting point is that if you're looking at side 2, you have Light Up the Sky as the beginning of the second side. And then after that, Spanish Fly, which is Van Halen's solo guitar song for this album. Like Eruption, which was previously on the previous album, the second track in the beginning was a very, ubiquitous guitar solo. Spanish Fly is kind of the same tapping concept, but this time on acoustic guitar, just to prove that he could do what he did on guitar, whether it was a electric guitar or whatever. He put together this Spanish Fly solo, and it kicked off second track off the second side. The second side kind of has this funny mirror with the first side from the previous album, and then it plays on out and finishes it on out. And those song tracks on that second side are all really great too. They're all worth mentioning. But what I'm really trying to get you a sense of is the way in which Ted Templeman went in and tried to make Van Halen II a similar experience to Van Halen I without actually making it the exact same album. It's pretty crafty. And again, if you look very closely at Van Halen's work, you can see similarities between any of their songs, especially in the early days. But the way in which the songs are ordered, particularly on the first side of Van Halen 2, are meant to recall the general experience, the overall feel of definitely the first side of Van Halen 1. And then by that time, you're pretty committed to the album. You turn it over. Side 2 is kind of a little bit of a separate experience. So Van Halen 1 and Van Halen 2, you could level the criticism at these two albums that they're very, very similar. But Van Halen 2 maybe doesn't quite have the sort of reckless energy that Van Halen 1 had. Van Halen 2, great disc, well worth checking out. And I will be coming back to you in a couple more weeks with Women and Children First, which is Van Halen's third album. So keep your eyes open for that. If you want to know when that's happening, please like and subscribe and share this music out with your friends. I will put a track from Van Halen 2 over my Spotify account. Next week, I'll come at you with quite possibly, the first installment of my top 20 for 2020. So please keep your eyes open for that. Until then, I'll catch you guys on the flip side.
She was a seaside sitting, just smoking and a drinking on ringside, on top of the world, oh yeah. She had a drink in her hand, she had her toes in the sand, oh, whoa, what a beautiful